I do take notes, obviously, and I write down talking points and questions or stats, and I'll put it down. And there's nothing worse than when I write something and I'm like in the middle of it and I stop writing it and I just like look at the page. See, so my first question, my first thing for James, is pull up the note. James Mirtle of The Athletic. I just wrote the complete, and I stopped writing, and it's like I wrote the complete, which is like the most incomplete thing that there is. I don't know where I was going with it, so we won't be discussing that topic. Happy New Year, buddy. Great to have you on.
We can try. We could try and guess what you were thinking. This is like a classic like holiday brain kind of. I don't know if you've been off, but I've been off for a while. This is my introduction back to working right now.
Hey,
so
we're doing each other a favor right now. Okay, like we're jogging. And I got to tell you this too. Is a lot of times for yours, and I think this is actually usually a compliment to the people that I'm most comfortable with doing the show with, is that I prepare a little bit less because I like the conversation to be even more organic, right? Like if I have someone like, Sundin on, I'm conservatively, 10 hours preparing for that, right? Like it's just like I'm prepping for days and days and days and putting stuff together and making sure that it like flows in a certain way. I've got like different outcomes of how the interview can go. Like you got to really be deep in the weeds. A lot of times like today with you and Ennis, it's like, okay, like I got a couple of talking points and we'll bounce around those two things and see where it goes. Today I actually have a lot of stuff, like because I had that insecurity of being away and being rested. I'm like pounding the table with stats and talking points and like I was writing notes during certain Leafs games. So, I remember what the complete is. You know what it is?
See, you do script the show.
See, scripted. This was all an elaborate ruse to eat up a little bit of time. The complete and utter just lack of interest I think people have now in the Matthews story. Like everyone is completely fatigued with this, right? Seeing Matthews' name come up on your timeline, like him in practice, or everyone's essentially got the same opinion, which is, hey, rest him as much as it takes. No one's trying to press him to play. But here's a couple of the quotes that he's had recently when talking about the injury. Quote, I don't know. By the way, this was being asked whether or not the injury will go away at some point this season. Quote, I don't know. I hope so. That's obviously the goal. It's tricky with these things sometimes. It's a physical sport. It's a contact sport. So things happen out there sometimes that are out of your control. So I'm just trying to manage it the best I can, and we can, and you go from there, end quote. He says there's a lot of positive signs. There's still no timeline. His coach is saying, quote, he'll let us know, end quote, when it comes to the way that he's feeling. I don't really understand hiding the injury at this point or what it is, because he let it be known that the cross-check didn't help the cause, is the way that he put it, when it comes to his injury. So, like, for those of you that think masking it is better for his long-term health, it's like, okay, well, everyone knows that if you're physical with him, he's not going to love it right now. I don't really understand at this point why they're not just saying, hey, LTIR, or, making it known that he's going to be out quite some time, knowing that it's going to be something that is lingering essentially through the rest of the season.
Well, I mean, he's hoping to come back relatively quickly. I mean, that's why he's skating at practice. And, I know it feels like Groundhog Day again. I know we're only in January, but, he's going to get back up to 80%, and then he's going to come back again, and then another team's going to hit him, and then he's going to be out again? Like, are we just going to do this all season? Yeah. I mean, we're left guessing because we don't know exactly what it is, but I think this is just one that he's going to have to play through all year, and that's tough news if you're a Leafs fan, because I don't even know if he has been at 80% this year.
His numbers are at 75.
Yeah.
Like if you project him over an 82 game season, he's going to be down around 30 points.
So the question is can the Leafs go the distance with him at 75%, or is he going to be able to be higher than that at some point this year? And I feel a little bit skeptical that he's going to be able to get back to 100%. I don't know if this is going to be like an off-season surgery situation or what it's going to be, but you're right. Like, fans are pretty cynical about all of this right now, and it's a huge cloud that's hanging over their season. I mean, probably the biggest one. We always, throughout the year, you and I always talk about what's the biggest question and what do they need to address by the deadline and what do they need to address before the playoffs. And usually it's a trade or, get rid of this guy or add this piece. And, we talked a lot early in the season about they need another centerman. with this one, it's like, how do you even address it? Some people have joked, put him on LTIR and spend the cap space, but probably the only way that that's able to happen is if they shut him down for the season, which is not what they're going to want.
It's not what they're going to want, but I actually think that I lean towards that camp because here's what I know. If you get him back at 75%, you'd rather have him than not. Like, you want to have him be in that spot. This is what happened during the playoffs last year. Like, you missed him for games, and it felt not hopeless, but certainly like you were an underdog at that point. And for this team that has been capped out, you've seen other teams do it. Like Tampa did it, obviously, with Kucherov. The Golden Knights have obviously done it with great success. If I'm the Leafs, this is what I would say. Right now, you're not doing it because he seems pretty clear that he wants to get back on the ice, right? Like, this guy, I would imagine, is pretty dead set about trying to play in the Four Nations as well, and I'll get to that in a second. But he wants to play hockey. He's a hockey player, and as much as I think that there is a kind of belief, because Matthews is like a cool guy who is from a non-traditional market and is a non-traditional hockey player, that like he in some way is not having the care level, the compete level of certain hockey players that have come before him, right? Like, no one equates him to being like Steve Yzerman, right? But everything that is known about this dude is that he lives for the game. Like, he is uber competitive, that he is absolutely dying to get back out on the ice. But I would say this, if it happens again, right? Like, if you're doing this, I would rather them do the LTIR move than have him turn into Joel Embiid, where it's just like in and out and trying and managing and mitigating. Like, they can't keep doing this song and dance.
If they try and spend that 11, or no, I guess it's 13 million this year because he's on the new deal. If they try and spend that 13 million, the league is going to be all over them with a magnifying glass.
Cry about it. Prove it. Well, dude, I mean, you can do the magnifying glass thing all you want. The guy went to Germany and he's been out multiple times. So
yes,
but
like,
this
the
one's
timing
far
of when
more
he
legitimate.
comes back, though, right? Like, is like the game one of the playoffs? All of a sudden, he's like, yeah, now I can play.
Yeah, who cares? That's exactly what other teams have done. Like, what did Mark Stone come back game 2? Kucherov came back game 1.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, so for the league to all of a sudden
Toronto, it's Toronto, I don't know.
This
I know
one's
that
more legit.
They've gotten, the league has gotten a lot of complaints about that situation, and there's talk about putting in a cap for the playoffs and all that. So I think it's going to get harder and harder for teams to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, until they do it. Like, force them to make it called the Auston Matthews rule, which would be such a joke because, again, the other markets do it that already have these tax advantages and weather advantages, whatever you want to do it, lifestyle advantages, and then there's not a peep to be made. But now all of a sudden Auston Matthews is a real injury and the league's going to start to cry foul. Like, no, this guy, again, is obviously going through major discomfort, going through something that does need to be mitigated, is going through something that is clearly being aided in some way through rest and is not being helped by the physical play of the sport, as is being mentioned by these guys on a day in, day out basis. And so my thought here is you try one more time. And if it's another setback, if it's another situation where this ends up happening, I just don't know how that can't be readily on the table. And so, yeah, I don't know how they weaponize that cap space. I don't even know if they could, use it all up in a way that actually makes sense for the team. But to me, that's the best course of action if they go through this one more time, because I think everybody's sick of it and the players should be sick of it and the team should be sick of it too. That being said, the Four Nations is now, a month and a week or so away, right?
I think it starts on like the 14th of
okay.
February.
So, a month and a half away. Where do you think they're at in terms of the approach here? Because my thought would be if this is something where he's going to be 75% over the course of the season, and we mentioned this to you at the outset of this, that he should be pulled. But where do you think he and the team are in terms of the understanding of you're not playing there because there's no way that he can play there already? It's done.
I don't think those conversations have happened yet. I think there's still, on his side, he's still optimistic that he can come back and play well for the Leafs between now and then be ready to go in there. So they haven't, as far as I know, they haven't talked about shutting him down for that yet. So, and I think it's going to be, he's missed all of the best on best. He had to play for Team North America the last time that there was one of these. I know he wants to be there, and him not playing in that is going to be a huge hit to the American team. So I get that everyone's looking at this and saying, how on earth can he possibly play in this? But I think I think they feel like there's still a little bit of time. I think, to what it does say is that he still has some optimism that he can get back to close to something to 100% between now and then. Now, obviously we're skeptical that can happen, but that's the feeling there.
So that's the positive side. The positive side is the one that you outlined, where it's like this guy is saying, hey, he's banged up, but he doesn't think that this is going to be something that's overly terrible and that he can get back to normal. And eventually they'll be able to mitigate this to where he's in the 90 percentiles, right? When we're doing the fake percentages of how much someone has to give. But let's just put it out that way. That's the nice way. And that's probably the real way, right? Like, let's be clear here. This is where I really lay my belief. That being said, part of my fear with this, James, is the feeling like he is trying to get back and trying to play enough games ahead of this tournament to justify him being at that tournament and prioritizing that tournament in a way that I don't think should be prioritized. And again, this is just a conspiracy. We're just two friends having a conversation back after. This is not based on information. This is even based on true belief. I'm just saying that is how it's going to be looked at if he goes to that tournament and then comes back and is hurt again. And you know what? Where there's going to be physical play, one would imagine, is did you see the junior game? These two nations hate each other. There's a lot to play for. My guess is that Canada is not going to go light on Auston Matthews simply because Mitch Marner's on the team, that he's going to get banged around in that tournament. And if he goes to that and he ends up getting hurt or worse, or then it becomes a situation where he's back on the table, the trainer's table, the doctor's table, whoever's table, he is going to take a PR hit in this city like maybe we haven't seen since Sundin wouldn't waive the no trade.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to be pretty darn close to 100% to go to that. So maybe they're just, I don't know. They're not going to announce that he's shutting it down for that tournament right now.
No. I agree.
There's still enough time.
I agree.
So we're just kind of, but I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he doesn't go.
Yeah, I will say this. He cannot go. I'm like my dad to me when I tried to go out on dates in grade 4. He's like, "You're not doing it. It's not happening. Sorry, buddy. Like you're yeah, I tried grade 4. I had my first girlfriend.
That's a UConn.
No, grade 5. Grade 5. It was grade 5. It was grade 5.
Married in grade 7.
Well, the thing is that actually the girl that I was supposed to go on a date with, I think got carried across the elementary school yard to like be my girlfriend. I didn't even know she was going to be. We were paired up. That's the way that goes in grade 5. Not the best. But yeah, he can't go flat out. Like this is something where the optics of it are too much. He would genuinely have to have put in now this entire month ahead of it and looked phenomenal and not have it be a story at all for people to even not question it. And even then, I think that it's fair to question it. Like, again, he cannot get hurt at this tournament. He's the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs now. That is supposed to come with something different. And I'm sorry to do this, but you just can't tell me that John Tavares would be doing the same thing if he had the same injury and going for Team Canada. Like, I don't think that he would. I don't think that many players would.
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that's going to pick up a lot in the next, 2 or 3 weeks. So I think right now, if you're the team, you want to just respect his process and hope that he gets better. And, you don't want to be going to him now and saying, you got to shut this down for this thing. You wait till you know where you're at. So
I think I'll take it actually a little bit of a step further. The team can't be the ones that tell him no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you can broach the conversation. How are you feeling about going to this thing? And I mean, if it was the Olympics, I think it's a little bit different.
Agree.
Right? Like,
Agree.
Probably a lot different.
It's not the Olympics, man. It's just not.
It's not a thing anyone's probably going to remember long term.
It will be remembered in that moment, and it will end up being something where my take on this, I haven't shared this yet, but it's kind of going to be like a COVID Cup, where if Canada wins the Four Nations and then they win the Olympics, it's going to be like, hey, we won both these tournaments. Same for the States, right? Like you win both these tournaments, it's going to really mean something. But if it's not the double gold for whatever nation ends up winning the tournament, it's going to be kind of, at the end of the day, irrelevant. Like it's going to fall behind what the Olympic gold is, right? Like if USA beats Canada at the Four Nations and then they lose to Canada in the Olympics, no American worth, a grain of anything is going to be like, whoa, we beat you at the Four Nations. Like, okay, like awesome. Like congratulations that you won the warm-up tournament. If you win both, you get to be like, yo, we beat you at 2 best on bests in a row. that is massive. That is monumental. Like, you got to carry that one. So to me, I think that part of the captaincy has to be the lead by example portion of this. And for, like, if it was me in my ideal world, which this is what that is, this is my show, I would hope that Auston Matthews, let's say February 1st, like a couple weeks out. Well, he's also maybe got to give his team a little bit more time to prepare for him not being there. So let's say somewhere around the end of the month, should be going to the Toronto Maple Leafs and saying, guys, I know we're eventually going to have a conversation about this, and I know the responsible thing to do for me is to rest through this tournament, and that I can't put my body through a quick turnaround, highly intense tournament, and then come back and feel like I'm going to be giving this team my best. I'm the captain of this team. I appreciate what that means to this market. I understand what this season represents for the fans, and I will not be going to the Four Nations tournament. I'll be withdrawing, and I'll be putting together an Instagram note or a PR piece that allows the rest of the hockey world to know.
Yeah, that all sounds like the right timeline, but I think the tricky thing is going to be is I think he is going to be back playing NHL games before then, and if he doesn't have another who was the player that cross-checked him? If he doesn't have another incident like he did against Buffalo, then maybe he's playing at 80-85% come the end of January, and then it becomes a harder conversation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. You got to remove the hard conversation from you and the team. Like, that, you have to remove it, man. Like, again, it's the juice is not worth the squeeze on this one for him. If he goes to that tournament and he ends up getting injured, or he comes back and is compromised, or gets hurt at any point after that tournament and he plays in it, I don't think the market will ever forget it. Like, I don't. I think that you will have a complete generation of fans that will always remember Auston Matthews as the guy who went to the Four Nations tournament instead of sticking it out for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, it's just, you know how it is here. And I hope at this point,
very leafy. It would fit with everything that's happened in his tenure here, just all the weird stuff look at what happened during the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I understand it. I empathize with him. I think everybody here is rooting for him just to be healthy, and they would all love a world where he can nip this in the bud and go play for his country. And even as a Canadian who is as diehard a fan there is, and like actually loves the best on best and loves the rivalry, I want to see Auston Matthews there in an ideal world. Like, I don't want America to have an excuse of, well, we didn't have Matthews at this tournament. Like, that's not ideal for me. That actually diminishes a tournament that I think I'm in the minority about when it comes to caring, about the stakes of it and believing in that double gold scenario. So I don't want them to have an excuse, but yeah, you can't have them go, man. You just can't have them go. It will show such a complete misunderstanding of what it means to be a Maple Leaf and what it means to be the captain of this team and the responsibility that he bears as the leader of this franchise. Okay, so let's move forward. So I don't know how I feel about this one, but I'm bringing it up anyways. So Isles game, Leafs could not break the puck out. You were at that one, right? Yeah, that was the afternoon game.
Yeah, I had a ticket to that game.
Yeah,
so,
Mr. Fanboy living in the city. Do you wear a jersey?
No, I don't own a jersey.
Yeah.
So the crowd was surly for that one. Like, I've been, a friend of mine has season tickets, and so I've sat in those seats before, and often the crowd up I was up in the 300 with the people, with my people, and but they were angry, and maybe they didn't enjoy spending their New Year's Eve watching that game, because that was one of the worst games I think I've seen from the seats. It was very, very boring.
Yeah. They got completely hemmed in the second period, especially. It required Steven Lorent's goal of the season for them to beat this Islanders team, which it was a beautiful goal. There's no question about it. And the Leafs continue to do their thing where they protect leads, which, again, league leading, blown leads. It's a huge positive on the season. It should be mentioned over and over and over again with this team. Even now, despite, them being, 4-4 since Stolarz is out? Like, they've actually...
I think 5-4 with that win.
5-4. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So 5-4. So yeah, slightly above 500, which is nice. But so they can't break it out in that game, and it was, to me, one of the most glaring issues with the team. And then you're looking at right now the way things have gone with the blue line from an offense standpoint. No goals from a defenseman in December. No points by a defenseman on the power play in December, which is crazy. I think still the only team in the NHL that does not have a goal from a defenseman in the third period. That one might be wrong based on me not tracking it, but I followed it loosely, and I still think it to be a fact. Are we starting to see defense become a bigger need when it comes to the trade deadline than we had originally anticipated, which was sort of the thought being, hey, this team needs to add a little bit of depth, probably on the right side, maybe someone who can play with Morgan Riley and help balance things out. But ultimately, you're not spending major assets here to a position of like, hey, as much as they clearly need a center, and especially given the Matthews injury, these needs are closer to one another than we thought even a month ago.
Yeah, ideal world, you're adding both now. And the defenseman you want to add is someone who can play in the top four, because you watch Philippe Myers in that game, and like they just, they went really heavy on adding size to the blue line and defensive play, and that part has worked. I mean, Tanev's been a beast, and Tanev's not the problem with moving the puck. I mean, he's great on the breakout, but I think, you were hoping that it's the same thing last year. They bring in Klingberg. They're hoping that there's some offensive juice there, and they were hoping with Ekman Larsson that he was going to bring something offensively. And, while there were spurts of that early in the season, you just haven't seen a lot from him in terms of creating anything with it. I mean, he had quite a few goals last year for Florida, right? I mean, he's been a guy that's scored a lot in the NHL, and we just haven't seen that shot unleashed from Ekman Larsson. So he's the only guy you can look at on the blue line and say there should be more coming there, because in general, they've, like Benoit is not going to score. Myers isn't going to score. If Hakanpää, if he played, and he too, Hakanpää hasn't said he's not going to the Four Nations yet. So that's another.
Apparently he's skating now too. So it's like, he's around.
Getting ready. Getting ready. That contract was to get him, those 2 games that he's played was to get him ready for the Four Nations for Finland. So.
Yeah, it was nice. Nice at least to do that.
But,
it's
so
clear
they
that
added
there's
a lot
2
of
guys
size
that need to have that. And it's Riley and, it's Ekman Larsson that need to be providing more offense.
Yeah. And, Riley's playing fewer minutes than he has, I think, since he was a rookie. His time's down, and he's playing with pretty weak partners, given that he's not getting the Tanev partnering that a lot of us thought he might get coming into the season. So I don't know. And the style that they're playing too, there's not a lot. Riley's a rush defenseman. A lot of the offense he would have generated at even strength in the past was jumping up into the rush and being, turning it into a 3-on-2 or something like that. And they're just not generating a lot of their offense that way, But what's interesting is like the last couple of weeks, the way they're getting scored on is other teams are scoring a lot from the blue line. Pelech had the goal that ended up getting disallowed because of the offside. But if you go back, they've had a whole bunch of goals go against. There was the last time they played the Islanders, it was the Isaiah Thomas scored. There's been a bunch. Edvinsson scored the big goal for Detroit against them from the blue line. And I think part of what's happening is they're playing this kind of collapse, protect the net front, and it's opening up a lot of lanes from the top. So the book on the Leafs a little bit right now is other teams are trying to generate offense from the point. And I think the Leafs need to get there. And Berube's talked about that. Like we gotta shoot more. And part of what he wants to see is traffic to the net, shot from the point, that old thing. And for whatever reason, it hasn't been going their way. And maybe part of it is they don't have a lot of big shots from the back end on this team.
No, they don't. And this is like, you can repeat that narrative like year over year with this Leafs team. And it's interesting because the book on them from point shots, like that's actually from the beginning of the season, there's data to suggest that like the way, and this goes for every goaltender, but the Leafs goalies have been so hot, but the one area where teams have really scored on Wool is layered screens. Like, packing the paint and having a bunch of guys out in front and then having those point shots that find their way through and that he's not able to track because that's been something that he's elite at this season. So, I think that at this point, my opinion is shifting a little bit from the, hey, just go get Luke Schenn and put him next to Morgan Riley thing to, hey, maybe go out and get somebody who does have that shot. And again, I'm talking, this is such pie in the sky thinking where you go, hey, you really want a right shot defenseman who can move the puck and also score the odd time? It's like, that would be great. I don't see a lot of those names available. I don't think that there are like any of those names available. But what I would say is that my thought process is starting to evolve to the point of like, you're not necessarily going all in on the best center, which was what I thought it was before. It's now become more of like, hey, whichever those 2 players are the right shot D that represents more of that skill set that I mentioned versus the center who can provide some offense and some depth, whichever of those 2 you think is the better player. It's like when you draft, You're taking the best player available essentially with whatever assets you have at either of those two positions.
Yeah, the thing I would say to that is often if you're trying to bring in a defenseman with that skill set with the shot, they're theoretically not going to have the other elements. Like they're not going to be big. They're not going to have the crease clearing element. And Treliving and Berube have clearly gone all in on that being their identity. So, you got to give something up if that's what you're going to be. Like if you want your blue line to look like Philippe Myers and Benoit and Hakanpää, they're not going to score. They're not going to produce a lot of offense. That's just not what you're building there. And they're going to be good at clearing the front of the net. And, the belief in the organization is that that's going to help them come playoff time. But, the lack of production from the back end is really glaring. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the best offensive teams in the league. And, last season they finished second in goals per game, and the defense just really didn't provide anything. And part of what they were hoping for was Ekman Larsson would help move the needle, and it just hasn't happened. And it's been part of the problem on the power play, right? Like they're just not getting a lot from that spot.
But that's all. I guess that's where I'm kind of going with this is, all right, they should probably be a little bit more creative in terms of how to add that, because it's pretty clear that every year we do the secondary scoring. We always pick out, the Alex Kerfoots and the David Camps of the world and go like, this is the issue, right? Like they don't have this guy that's a forward who scores. And I think it is just a little bit more layered in terms of how little they get from their blue line and how big an issue this is when you stand out to the point where, again, you don't get a defenseman who scores a goal on your hockey team. How many games do they play in December? I think 15. Actually, I know 15 because that's where I'm going with the next thing. So it's like 15 games. You didn't get a goal from a defenseman. Like, that's a problem. That's not good. That can help you score too, is getting the right guy on, I guess, that right side. And so, yeah, it might come at the expense of a little bit of size. And I'm not advocating for this team to go out and get, Tyson Barrie. But, yeah, somebody...
He's available.
Yeah, guess what? Every year at the deadline, you got to go out and get him. He's there. Either way, I think they got to try to take a real hard, strong look at what they could do there that might make sense for their team. Anyway, the next thing, I know there's 15 games in December because I wrote this down. Like, Knies scored that goal that gets taken off the board. And I went, man, it feels like he really needed that. I just don't, remember him having the impact. And they take it off the board, and I look at his numbers. It's 2 goals and 5 points in December. So that's over 15 games. No goals in his last 8, 1 in his last 14. A lot of this is shooting percentage. Like, I always look at this and go like, all right, have the shots dropped off? Like, what's sort of happened here? Like, he went from shooting 22 and 27% to now 9%. So some of this is just like, regression, water finding its level a little bit. He's probably never going to be, a 27% shooter, 22% shooter. But I thought it was pretty interesting that Berube mentioned the way that he's playing right now. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like something along the lines of like he needs to play a little bit more reckless, maybe was the term. Yeah, was that it?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I felt that. Like, I feel that with Knies right now. And, yeah, I guess, are you seeing something materially different with him? Do you feel as though that part of his game is really missing from where it has been at? Is there a solution to you, or is this simply just like sometimes we do overreact to shooting percentage and it'll normalize and he'll kind of go back to like maybe he wasn't what we thought at the beginning of the season where he was just stacking the points in an insane way, that maybe he is a little bit more what we were projecting. But yeah, like what is the concern level for this with you?
Well, I think he was a bit banged up, right? And then, coming back from that, I think that's part of, sometimes I think you can get a little bit tentative and you're not as reckless and as crash and bang as, the goal it was a beautiful goal. And he was just so deflated when that goalie interference happened, because you could tell he really wanted that one. And it was a highlight reel play. And that was really the play of the game, even though it ended up not counting.
Lorentz was the play of the game, but yeah, go on.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah.
But I think for the just I don't know. I mean, Lorentz has felt like a lightning strike or something, whereas the Knies one was like, yeah, that's what this guy is. This is what you're a fan. You're like, yeah, like that's we got fair. This, and in person, like he when you're sitting relatively close, the guy, he looks like a mutant out there. He's huge. Knies just really stands out for his size and physicality, and he's still a young guy. I mean, this is his second season. I know last year the grind of the long NHL season really got to him because he was used to kind of a college USHL kind of schedule. And he's going to have to, still learning how to, you get hurt, you get banged up, you got to play through that. You got to still maintain your physicality, because if he doesn't have that, then he's not going to be productive. And I think he's learning all of those things. And I think Berube's pushing the right buttons with him where, a lot of people talked about when Berube came in as being kind of this taskmaster disciplinarian, but I think he's actually very kind of kind in the way that he offers these kind of, assessments of the players. And it doesn't ever feel like it's coming from a really negative, mean place the way that it used to with some of the coaches the Leafs have had in the past. And I think he's 100% right that Knies just has to be more physical. And for him, there just really can't be any cheating in the way that he's going to be able to generating offense. There just can't be any. He's not going to be like Marner. He's not going to be dancing around everybody and still be able to be a 30-goal guy. He's going to have to get dirty, and it's hard to do that when you're playing every second night for months and you're banged up. And you have players out of the lineup. He's not there with Matthews putting it on a tee for him. So, they need him to step up. And he's still a young guy, and he's still finding his way in the league. So I don't think anyone should. He was overdue for some of this. You're right. He wasn't going to be. And this is why you don't want to get into the contract negotiation when he's on pace for 42 goals or whatever it was early in the year. Just wait it out, and I think he's going to find his level. And I think where you want him to get is he's still getting the chances, even if they're not getting buried. And I think that what you've seen over the last month is he hasn't been getting the chances nearly as frequently as he was earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think, though, the major thing with me is I love Matthew Knies, not when he's scoring. That's great. But it's when he feels like he is adding to the Matthews, Marner, oh, my God, you're terrified when this guy's on your hip. He has that relentless pursuit, and he will hit you. And he's a big guy. So even though some of the hits aren't necessarily the most violent looking, I think that he puts some pretty serious pressure on the other team's blue line, especially the way that the Leafs play, right? Which is hey, we dump it in, we forecheck. That's the style of play that we are going to utilize throughout the course of the season. That Knies' import is actually maybe even a little bit higher than we speak about him sometimes, just because he is only 22 years old. And he needs to hit. He needs to be uber physical, and he needs to feel like he's got his legs underneath him. And last year, I remember texting a couple of people that, hey, what are you seeing with him versus what he was doing at college? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. It's not a really big deal. But it did feel like he hit a bit of a rookie wall. And that was at 13 minutes a game. Oh, sorry, almost 14. So it was the 13:41. But yeah, this year he's at 18:17. That's a big uptick. Different. That's a big uptick in minutes, man. And so I do wonder if the coaching staff, now he's being bumped down to the third line, right? He's getting a bit of a different look. I wonder if they try to mitigate those minutes a little bit so that there's not so much on his plate, so that he does hit the stretch run a little bit more fresh. They're going to have the February break. But yeah, there's been a lot of games that have been condensed with this schedule so far. But yeah, just because he's young and fit and looks like, he's been sculpted out of marble, he's a human being, and I think that maybe it's a little bit too much too soon from a minute standpoint if you're starting to see this continue throughout January.
Yeah, the combination of not playing with Matthews and having a lesser center most of the time.
All the time.
and being a bit banged up, and just the grind of how many games there are and his age. That's all what you're seeing there. So for him, I think you want to take a little bit of pressure off him. And he's been on the number one power play unit too with Matthews out. So there's even
Kills
more
penalties.
Minutes there. And he's been I guess third unit penalty kill, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it adds up. And it's a lot of pressure on him. And you don't want him to fall into kind of where he's questioning himself more and having confidence issues.
Yep. I'm totally with you on that one. And by the way, just to kind of close this out, I'm hopeful that the Berube Uber accountability thing ends up coming into effect next season. Again, this is just my theories, much like the Matthews thing, that, hey, he's year one. He's been a player's coach. Players love him. But that he is sort of just dipping his toe with his team and this culture. And talking to Rick Bowness, it gave me a little bit of perspective on that, where he was talking about with Winnipeg, he felt like it wasn't until year two when his Jets team really started to get the system down and really be fully bought into what he was preaching and see the results of it and go on down the line. That, hey, this is a bit of if you're a coach of a team like this and you're him, you're trying to play this a little bit more long game. And so year one, you're letting Nylander be out there on power play 2 for 4-minute shifts, right? Without
not anymore.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, without pasting him publicly about it, right? And he hasn't had, I don't think he's had one quote this year where I've been like, ooh, that's a toughie, like, ooh, that's a bad one. He's just let these guys, like Matthews comes back and they're like, Marner, go back with him. It's fine. Best buds, Nylander, play on the power play as much as you want. Come off. Hey, whenever you feel like it, buddy, that's when you come over here. Like, the accountability stuff hasn't exactly been what we were promised, let's say, based on the bluster of the podium speak. But I would guess that, again, it's just a guess. My guess is that this year will be treated very differently than next year once he's been here a little bit longer and he feels like he has more of the trust of the players, that he's still in like the earning it phase and doesn't want to like sewer guys or do things publicly or hold them to task with benchings and things like that in year one. Does that make sense to you?
He doesn't have a Tortorella style. Like,
no.
So, no, he's got to build up a little bit of currency with your best players.
Yeah.
And, then if you need the hammer at some point when you really need it, then you can take it out. But,
right.
Yeah.
Like,
I think he's handled it well. Like, it's not, I remember, like, I covered the team when Ron Wilson was here, and it's just sometimes he would just, like, destroy a guy. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're just burning bridges, and then when the team quits on you and everyone's like, yeah, that makes sense. So
Ron Wilson, always forever a legend, though, for proving Jason Spezza was a cheater, though, with his stick, which is pretty great. And especially now that Jason Spezza is, tried for war crimes in the city and all good deeds that he has had have been undone. That's a great memory back again. It was like that was a hidden memory, and now it's fully back now that he's in Pittsburgh with Dubas. Last thing. I was just thinking about this and whatever, little musings. And I very much don't like to criticize publicly the players on the junior team at this point. I just don't think it's fair. Like, criticize them as a group. I think it's bad, but I don't do a lot of singling out. But yeah, certain players haven't had the best tournaments, I would say, so far. And I was thinking a little bit about like how this deadline and the import of it. And let's just put it this way. Do you think that anybody in the prospects system is untouchable?
That's a great question. I don't think they should be.
Because it sure felt last year like one guy in particular was untouchable, and I was thinking, like, is he for sure now?
Yeah, because of the World Juniors, eh? It's interesting.
No, I certainly wouldn't say that. But
it sounds like that was what the intro you had scripted out certainly pointed. It's interesting, with the way those games have gone. I've gotten people in my texts and DMs from other markets, and they're watching Easton Cowan up close, and they're like, what exactly is this guy?
Yeah, I didn't name names, but I would say that I've had some thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I think that the Toronto hype train with him has gotten a little bit out of control. So, and they're kids, right? And it's
they're just kids.
Their most high stakes tournament he's ever played in, and you see some warts, and. Sure do. I don't think that should mean that all of a sudden you're thinking of trading him. What I will say is it's been pretty
isn't
clear.
About that. I want to make this clear, though. I'm not trying to advocate that, like, you see a bad World Juniors and all of a sudden I'm like, you should trade him. That's idiotic. Like, it's the stupidest take that you could possibly have. My thought was just simply like, okay, when you watch, like, if you see somebody, you're like, if the Leafs would have had Matthew Schaefer, you're like, that's an untouchable. Like, that's you never move off of that guy no matter what. You see what Gavin McKenna is so far, and you're like, yeah, clearly that is going to be an untouchable. And I haven't felt like watching Easton Cowan that I'm like, that's an untouchable. Like you're in a competitive cycle. You could absolutely, under no circumstances, trade that player. That's all. I had that thought of being like, okay, like, would you move him? Like, there's got to be a price point that you kind of would in this cycle. That's all. Whereas before it was like you can't move it based on last season. Like you could not touch him.
There's been some talk they're looking at potentially adding players that have term. So if there's a trade, like for a rental you don't trade.
Of course not.
And Cowan, and like that doesn't make any sense. And there's been a reluctance in the organization to trade first round picks and trade high end prospects for rentals. So,
which is smart.
If there's some super trade out there where you're getting a player with term who's going to make a really big impact, you're going to have to put something into the trade to make it happen. You're going to have to put something of value. And unfortunately for the Leafs, they don't have a lot of assets to trade. They just, there's not a lot of They have hardly any picks in the upcoming draft. They have hardly any marquee prospects. So if they're going to swing big and do something, which I don't think is the worst plan, given the window and where they're at right now, then the only thing is that the Matthews thing hangs over all of this, right? Like, is this the trade deadline you want to get aggressive at with where Matthews is at?
Well, it is if you put him on LTIR and you load up. Like, I'll tell you that much. It is if you do the JD strategy. Like, this could be a little bit of a different story. No, I'm with you. I get it. And like I said, I'm not making. I certainly, and I mean this sincerely, like, I don't like the idea of making one kid some big negative story from a World Junior tournament, and that's really not what I'm trying to do. It's just simply that when I'm watching him play, and this is the only real look I get at him because I'm not watching London Knights games on the regular. But yeah, I want to see what a guy looks like on this stage, especially when they're in this year, right? Where it's like, hey, this is your year. He's supposed to be one of the guys on the team. And yeah, you want to know, like, hey, what is somebody to you? And where is this team at? And for me, some of the thinking has been, I've been pretty reluctant even at the idea of trading Fraser Minton. And I've made my case for this before, being like, I just think that what he represents of a controllable young center who is not going to be a superstar, but is going to be on that contract with the team that's looking to do the things Toronto is, like, it just carries a lot of value. So you're not moving him for a rental. You're not doing Easton Cowan for a rental. But yeah, I think that with both those guys, where the Leafs are at, you get the right type of trade. And I'm just not hanging up the phone if teams call about them, if I'm Tree Living. That's all.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense with the window that they're in, their contention window. Like, I don't know that Easton Cowan's going to be really moving the needle for the Leafs probably
for a couple
in the next
of years.
2 years. Yeah.
So. Anyway. All right, Mirtle. Thanks as always for making time for the show. Happy New Year. I hope that you're feeling a little bit more work ready now.
Yeah, you got me warmed up.
Yeah,
so
all right, good. Beauty. Thanks, pal. Talk to you later.